of human comprehension.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. April 6, 1992, Duke's men's basketball beats Michigan 71-51, winning back-to-back titles for the Blue Devils.
And here comes Duke on the break. Behind the back, Hurley, the hill, why not? That's the play that was available. Nobody back for Michigan because they're sending 5 to the board.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Stocks jumped higher at the open today after the reported death tolls in some of the world's coronavirus hotspots showed signs of easing over the weekend. The Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq all up about 4% in the early minutes of trading this morning. Virus hotspots in New York, Italy, and Spain posted drops in the death toll, providing some hope that the outbreak is easing. The global economy is already contracting and is losing steam faster than in the early days of the financial crisis. That's the main takeaway from Bloomberg Economics' new GDP tracker. The tracker reading for March shows the global economy contracting at an annualized rate of 0.5%. With lockdowns deepening over the course of March and set to stay in place in April, the March reading is unlikely to be the worst of the downturn. Checking crude oil this morning, it's declining, lower by about 5% and back under $27 a barrel. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
The markets. No, you can't just run screaming from the room.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
But you don't have to manage this alone.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
What is your early read as to the scope and scale of this plan?
Bloomberg Markets. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
What we see more bonds, more yield.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning. A shift in tone coming up. We'll talk about the risk on feel in markets. They look at the possible plateauing of the cases and the deaths from coronavirus in some of the peak hotspots. Plus, we'll take a look at oil as people wonder when Saudi Arabia and Russia will get together and agree to cut production. Right now, let's get a check on the numbers. Greg Jarrett has that for us with the Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, this flash is sponsored by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com. Stocks continue to surge after the reported death tolls in some of the world's coronavirus hotspots showed signs of easing over the weekend. The yen is weaker and treasuries fall. We check those markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is up 4.7%, up 116. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 4.9%, up 1,032. And the Nasdaq is up 4.5%, up 335. The 10-year is down 17/30 seconds with a yield of 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate is off earlier losses, but still down 3.5% at 27.37 a barrel, while COMEX Gold's up 2.6% at 16.8860 an ounce. The dollar yen, 109.05. The euro, $1.797, and the British pound, $1.2293. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is on with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Hey, Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. Market Drivers is brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, ranked one of the most research-intensive universities in the nation by the Carnegie classification. More at njit.edu/R1. Well, certainly a risk-on day today. That's despite some very conservative outlook from Jamie Dimon in his annual letter, as well as some conservative calls coming out of some of the strategists and economists at J.P. Morgan. But a risk-on day today. Perhaps some of the plateauing in some of the hot spots, as Lisa was mentioning, maybe supporting this marketplace. Let's see where the real action is with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at today?
Well, this really does look like the flip side of what we've been seeing so often over the past several weeks. I mean, consider that all but 15 stocks in the S&P 500 are higher at this point, and one of those exceptions is Delta Airlines, where they talked about a 90% drop in second quarter revenue. They talk about how they're going through $60 million in cash a day. Oh, and Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway cut its stake last week by 18%. So all those things together kind of get your attention, but it really is a broad-based advance. And if you look at what's leading, it's the kinds of shares that led on the way down. Notable what's going on with some of the retail and apparel shares. You've got Capri Holdings, which is the owner of Michael Kors, sort of leading the way in the S&P 500. And you have PVH, which is Calvin Klein, higher. You have the Gap higher, Nordstrom, and some of the real estate investment trusts that are tied into retailing, notably Simon Property, up 15.5% at the moment. So, just perhaps a bit of bottom fishing, you might say. I mean, given how much these shares have fallen lately.
That's where I wanted to go. I guess I'm struck by what Scott Meinard said of Guggenheim, where he was saying basically he thinks that there's been too much optimism baked into shares. He's surprised that markets haven't fallen further, especially given the fact that even if we do have a plateauing in the number of cases, that's not going to stop the social distancing. That's not going to bring the economy back that quickly. There still is a whole lot of hurt, Dave.
Oh, there is. And really, we don't have a great handle on how much hurt at this point when you look at corporate earnings. I was struck just going through a couple of reports out of Citigroup. Tobias Levkovich, who's their chief U.S. equity strategist, looking for a 24% drop in earnings per share for the second quarter. And then you turn to the global strategists, Robert Buckland and his team, and they take sort of the bigger picture kind of numbers for the economy and come up with figures out of that. And, for this year, they're looking for a 45% drop potentially in earnings. So the numbers are still a bit all over the place, and they probably will be until we get enough first quarter results out of U.S. companies to get a sense of what's really happening here. I mean, we know that it's not great. I mean, when you look at Delta, and I mentioned that 90% drop in second quarter earnings, analysts only looking for a decline of 52% on average. Now, only doesn't really quite fit given the magnitude of what they expected, but that kind of gap, it tells you what may lie ahead when it comes to a whole lot of other companies, and therefore what's happening in the broader market.
So, Dave, what are you going to be looking for? I mean, you watch earnings more closely than anybody here at Bloomberg. What do you think these management teams can even say when they get on the calls over the next several weeks about their outlook?
Well, that's going to be the question, because so many companies have not been willing to kind of step up. I mean, given, sort of the doubts that they're dealing with, in terms of if they've had to shut down locations, when do they get to open them back up? If they're doing business online, how much does that compensate for, not having stores or restaurants or whatever closed? I mean, there's so much to get through that, this set of quarterly results, it's perhaps not going to be so much about, just sort of looking at the numbers, but trying to have anything to hang on to in terms of what the future looks like from here, so that you get some kind of more definitive kind of sense of, what these companies are anticipating.
Although taking a step back, right, so we don't have any visibility whatsoever. There still are more questions than there are answers. We don't know how the economy will emerge from this. We don't know how well this whole containment effort's really going to work in the long run. However, volatility is going down. If you look at the VIX index, how much is this just a story about central banks globally and fiscal stimulus, basically showering the markets with money and saying, we'll give you whatever it takes. And basically, investors are saying, we get the message, we're going to buy the dip, and we're going to hold on. I mean, is that what we're seeing today, Dave?
Well, no doubt that's part of the backdrop. I mean, I just look at what's going on with the banks, and it's rather astounding because, you've got the four biggest banks all up at least 7% in today's trading. Citigroup up more than 9%. And bear in mind, on Friday, we actually have a story out about this. Looking at the KBW Bank Index, 24 companies in there, including the four I just mentioned, Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo. And that index fell to a record low relative to the S&P 500 on Friday. So it got even lower than it did back in the financial crisis in 2008 or anywhere else in the past. So, it just goes to show you how extreme things have become. And you look at today and you see how extreme the reaction is in terms of the shares moving higher.
So talking about extreme reactions, Dave and Paul, on Friday we started something new. Dave, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we're doing a dad joke of the day. And we asked people to write in suggestions and submissions, and I got quite a few. They were all wonderful. I was laughing out loud at a lot of them. I'm going to select a couple from Charlene. She has some dad jokes from her 11-year-old son, which I'm partial to because I have an 11-year-old son. Okay, so you guys are going to judge. You're going to judge them. She sent me two, and the first one is, what did the excited gardener do when spring finally came?
What?
He wet his plants.
I'm giving that an 8 out of 10.
Oh, 8 out of 10? What about you, Dave?
That was good.
That sounds about right.
Okay, so then the next one's pretty good. Why did the hipster fall through the ice?
Why did the hipster fall through the ice? Why?
Because he wasn't cool enough. That one didn't get.
I had to think about that.
No, that's no higher than a 6, especially now that it's springtime and all the ice is melted.
All right, fair enough. Well, if you have a dad joke of the day, you can always submit it at Lebramowitz@Bloomberg.net, or you can tweet it out at me. But I'm just throwing that out there. Look, it's a rough time right now for a lot of people. It's important to have a little levity.
Let's have a little fun because dads are home with their kids and dad jokes are flying.
Evidently. I really enjoy them.
Exactly right. All right, we have green on the screen here, Lisa. Let's get the day rolling here. But first, let's go down to Washington, D.C. to get our world and national headlines with Amy Morris. Amy, what do you have?
All right, thank you, Paul. Wall Street reacted positively as the White House sees signs of the COVID-19 outbreak stabilizing. President Trump pointing to a reduction of daily fatalities in New York as a sign that the spread could be leveling off.
We see light at the end of the tunnel. Things are happening. Things are happening. We're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be very proud of the job we all did.
At the same time, though, it is expected to be a grim week for fatalities. White House health official Deborah Birx says they are still expecting a surge in New York, Detroit, and Louisiana.
By the predictions that are in that healthdata.org, they're predicting in those 3 hotspots, all of them hitting together in the next 6 to 7 days.
Now, there are more than 330,000 coronavirus cases just in the U.S., New York State with the most infections and deaths, although fatalities do appear to be stabilizing. The state reported 594 deaths yesterday, which is less than the day before, a reduction of about 36. Worldwide, there are 1.3 million cases of COVID-19, and in Europe, deaths in Italy and Spain are falling. Italy reporting its lowest fatalities in 2.5 weeks. Spain saw a decline for the 4th straight day. In the UK, however, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been hospitalized with COVID-19. Now that comes as the UK reports its deadliest day with more than 680 fatalities. Projections show the worst of that outbreak coming to Britain in 7 to 10 days. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes, with early diagnosis, pre-diabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com. Bloomberg Business app or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
London, it's time to play Find Unlimited. Get ready to play from wherever you are because we're bringing the game to you. Vodafone and Samsung are giving you the chance to win one of thousands of tech prizes, including the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G. What will you find in your area? Play between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. You'll have to be quick. Register now at findunlimited.co.uk.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. Somehow, I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom. Which.co.uk. Our tests find you the best.
This is the sound of diarrhea flushing your day away. Don't let it ruin your day and leave you feeling drained from dehydration. Diarrhelite is scientifically proven to help you recover from dehydration faster and better than with water alone. So don't forget your Diarrhelite today. Available at your local pharmacy or supermarket. Always read the label.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Hiya, it's Mel B. I'm just calling to say whether you're searching for a babe, a boo, or a bit of fun, there's one B you can always rely on. Badoo, the dating app which matches you with people based on your interests. Now more than ever, we want to be connected. You're more than just a photo, so be your true self and connect with a like-minded community. There's a new B in town. Download the Badoo app today. Badoo, date honestly.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you, I beg you to come down here
right now! Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk Is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Sponsored by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in the independent advisor satisfaction category among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. All three main American equity gauges are rallying after New York State fatalities fell for the first time, and President Donald Trump said he sees signs the pandemic is beginning to level off. The Stoxx Europe 600 index also jumped after Italy and Spain said they had the fewest deaths in more than 2 weeks. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 4 3/4%, up 118. The Dow's up over 5%, up 1,054, and the Nasdaq is up 4.7%, up 344. The 10-year is down 17/30 seconds. The yield is 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 5% at $26.90 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 2.8% at $16.92 even per ounce. The dollar yen, 109.16. The euro, $1.0804, and the British pound, $1.2306. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, like all financial markets, the municipal bond market has certainly been racked by volatility over the last couple of months. But the upcoming and potential fourth fiscal stimulus plan is likely to include a pretty big slug for infrastructure. The question for a lot of investors is, what would that mean for the municipal bond market? Fortunately, we have Michael Zezas, Chief U.S. Public Policy and Municipal Strategist from Morgan Stanley, joining us. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start by just giving us a lay of the land, what it's been like to be a municipal bond investor over the past couple of months.
It hasn't been fun. The volatility that you've seen over the last, call it 3 to 4 weeks, is pretty astonishing. So the move you had from basically the tights of the muni bond market to the wides were both bigger in magnitude and speed by several degrees than what you had in the global financial crisis. So, this is not something that is necessarily unexpected because you've got a muni market structure which is given to bouts of volatility, and you saw this in taper tantrum, and you saw this in 2010. But this was just degrees further off the chart, quite literally off the charts.
Michael, there's a question about just the volatility that comes from a market that's not as liquid as, say, treasuries. And then there's the volatility stemming from the question of whether we're going to start seeing municipal defaults. And I'm just going to go full catastrophic here. Is the subway system in New York City going to default?
That's a more complicated question to answer than you would think.
That's not what I want to hear. The answer is no. These major metropolitan areas are solvent and we're going to be fine. Is that not the reality that we're talking about?
Well, major metropolitan area is different than the subway system. Here's what I'd say. The chief of the MTA basically expressed the view that they need extra cash flow support because they're down 90% on ridership. And I don't think that's necessarily hyperbole. Now, in the bill that was just passed by Congress, they got about $3.8 billion worth of external support. So from a cash flow perspective, they're saying that they need more than that. And probably a lot of this is going to be contingent on how long ridership is depressed as it is. I wouldn't necessarily conflate what's going on with the MTA as being indicative of kind of broader metro areas generally, right? The MTA is sort of its own system. New York City government is its own sort of separate balance sheet and income statement per se. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about looking at a credit like the MTA, which has a lot of debt and is experiencing a substantial decline in ridership, and extrapolating from that to the broader kind of, like a high grade city metropolitan area world of muni bonds.
So, Michael, there is talk in the upcoming fiscal stimulus number 4 that there would be, a pretty big piece of infrastructure. We're hearing that from Speaker Pelosi. How do you think that might play out, and how's kind of the market reacting to that kind of potential?
At the moment, I don't think the market is terribly focused on this. It's probably more focused on whether or not the Fed is going to intervene here eventually. But here's what I'd say about infrastructure when it comes to munis. Obviously, it matters quite a bit how the spending is structured. But historically, when the federal government has decided to boost the amount of infrastructure spending it's doing, what it's actually done is take some of the credit pressure off of the state and local governments. If the federal government is putting more money into the system, state and local governments spend a little bit less of their own, so it effectively helps them improve on their capital needs, but not on their dime, so to speak. So if you got that slug of money, I kind of view that as a modest credit positive, not necessarily addressing what are the acute needs of the muni credit system right now, but I'd say it's a modest positive.
I guess the reason why I asked about the subway system, and yes, that's an idiosyncratic credit. I guess on a broader level, you're talking about the amount of money that's going to get injected in states and municipalities from the CARE Act and from Congress. And I'm just struggling to understand the depth of the pain. You have a slowdown in local economies. You have an incredible increase in spending, trying to build out the healthcare infrastructure. Is there a high chance that we're going to see muni defaults in a significant way, in a way that we've never seen before, especially when you throw in the pensions and the underfunded status there?
Yeah, well, I think you have to answer that question sector by sector. I guess the first thing I would say is that $150 billion out of this bill going to states ends up being somewhere around kind of 2 to 5% of general fund revenues of states. Now, our economists have us in real GDP terms being down over the course of the year about 5.5%. So if you assume, and I don't know if this is a good assumption yet or not, we're still doing our own work on it, but you assume that state tax revenues might be down at least that much, then it's probably fair to say that we've only addressed part of the kind of near-term shortfall. And if you're a state, then you're going to have to either draw down on your own reserves, do some cash flow borrowing, or undertake some austerity, or probably some combination of all of those. And the severity of this downturn is much greater than anyone expected. But coming into this, I think it was fair to say that state and local governments hadn't necessarily built reserves back up to levels where before the global financial crisis they would have been able to just rely on their reserves. So it's a sector we've been underway for a while, and I think you're still supposed to look at it that way. But if you're looking at something like airports, for example, which on its surface could look pretty scary because no one's flying, the liquidity and the reserve position of airports is almost off the charts on the other side. So we think there's a lot more opportunities there.
Michael Zezas, thank you so much for being with us. Michael Zezas, Chief U.S. Public Policy and Municipal Strategist for Morgan Stanley, joining us, putting to bed some of my absolute catastrophic situation extrapolations, which is a good thing. I'm Lisa Abramowitz with Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Markets.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. A strong start for Wall Street this Monday with stocks soaring. The Dow up more than 1,000 points. Death tolls in some of the coronavirus hotspots around the world showed signs of easing over the weekend. On the agenda this week, the Federal Reserve releases the minutes from its special March 15th meeting when it cut rates a quarter point. Plus, the markets will be closed this Friday in observation of Good Friday. Boeing decided to keep its Seattle area commercial manufacturing hub closed indefinitely. The company has about 135 confirmed coronavirus cases among its global workforce. The pandemic injects fresh uncertainty into Boeing's plans to restart its 737 MAX production. And the maker of Purell hand sanitizers was granted exclusions from U.S. tariffs on components it imports from China. Gojo Industries builds its hand sanitizer and soap dispensers in the U.S., but key inputs made in China were subject to a 25% import tax. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
London. Find Unlimited is here to brighten your day. Vodafone and Samsung are giving you the chance to win one of thousands of tech prizes all over the city, including the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G. Play from wherever you are. When we say the word, look for the Vodafone Unlimited symbol near you for your chance to win. Register now at findunlimited.co.uk.
The football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick. The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Hiya, it's Mel B. I'm just calling to say whether you're searching for a babe, a boo, or a bit of fun, there's one B you can always rely on. Badoo, the dating app which matches you with people based on your interests. Now more than ever, we want to be connected. You're more than just a photo, so be your true self and connect with a like-minded community. There's a new B in town. Download the Badoo app today. Badoo, date honestly.